the world's biggest commodity trader, Glencore, is under scrutiny after a massive leak of confidential information from law firm Appleby Global Group Services. Now, Glencore was one of Appleby's top clients. According to the leaks, the firm had a Glencore Room at its Bermuda office, where information on the trader's 107 offshore companies was kept. The leaks, called Paradise Papers, show that in 2009, Glencore made a $45 million loan to a company owned by Israeli billionaire Dan Gertler. In return, Gertler was required to secure certain approvals from his government. Glencore, of course, has dismissed any allegations of impropriety. And staying with the Paradise Papers, the leaks have revealed that Britain's Queen Elizabeth II has invested some of her private money in offshore tax havens. According to documents obtained by the International Consortium of Journalists, the Queen's investment managers placed roughly $13 million in offshore portfolios in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. Now, the Duchess of Lancaster, which holds assets for the British monarch to generate income for her, confirmed in a statement that some of its investments are in overseas accounts. It said that all its investments were legitimate, and of course her use of offshore tax havens is likely to generate criticism from activists seeking to abolish the monarchy in favor of a republic. Well, let's get more on what has been dubbed the biggest tax leak since the Panama Papers. We're joined now by Richard Bestick in London and Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg. Welcome to you both. Now, Richard, let's start with you. These offshore secrets that have been revealed, they did reveal some damning cases of tax abuse and certainly questionable practices. What are some of the most shocking that we've seen, and did they reveal any clear signs of illegal dealings?
Well, I think that's probably one of the first things we need to address. It's all about tax evasion and tax avoidance. Avoidance good, Uche, evasion illegal. And most of what these, or rather, as far as we know, all of the accounts sheltered in these tax havens were evasion. But they do, as you were pointing out there, cause embarrassment, and there's going to be plenty of embarrassment to go around, because there are something in the region of 13.5 million documents that have been leaked, and including Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain, who you were rightly saying has invested through her financial advisors in the Duchy of Lancaster some $13 million in these things. She hasn't done anything wrong. There is no suggestion that the Queen's financial advisors have acted illegally, but bearing in mind that she is, or should be, a paragon of virtues, someone that is followed by people purely as a good example of correct behaviour. Perhaps there will be those, like the opposition leader, the Labour opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who will be calling for her to apologise and stop doing it. He says everyone that puts money into these tax shelters should be aware not just of the damage that they do to the British economy by taking away tax pounds from schools and hospitals, but they should also apologise. But as I say, there's plenty of embarrassment to be going around. Let's look at Donald Trump, the US president, for example, and it turns out that his Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, is deeply involved. He still holds financial involvement with a company called Navigation Holdings. Who are they? Well, they rent out shipping to one of Russia's biggest providers of oil and gas, a massive energy provider in Russia. At least two of the people on the board of this company, called Cyber, are under some kind of scrutiny, some kind of scrutiny by the US authorities. And guess what? Who is not a major shareholder, but with something like 9% of the economy? It is Kirill Shamikov. Who's he? Well, he happens to be none other than the son-in-law of the Russian president, Mr. Putin. Now, again, no one is suggesting anything is illegal here, but already the rumblings are coming out of the United States that we have a situation at the moment where Donald Trump is under intense scrutiny over his relations with Russia and whether those relations do actually go into the illegal. And here we have a very close friend of his, a friend of 25 years, a man who actually bailed out Donald Trump from bankruptcy proceedings a long time ago, back in the 90s, still financially involved with this major Russian company. So as I say, Uche, a lot of embarrassment to go around, and it will keep on coming for quite a while, I believe.
Quite right. And Angelo, is it a similar situation in South Africa? We have seen this leaks include multinationals like Glencore, banks like Standard Bank, and certainly high net worth individuals there. So what has been the fallout so far?
Well, Uche, there's been nothing obvious yet. I had a look at the Standard Bank share price, for example, and it was trading up 1.3% at the close today. So that's probably a function of the overall market. So there's nothing negative happening there. In terms of Glencore's local shares, those were trading relatively flatly today. I had a look at Investec and its London-based PLC, and they were down marginally. So what the release of the information and the analysis of the data dump has again highlighted is that there's some borderline tax practices that are happening. Practices like paying sales commissions offshore and admitted to by the likes of Lonman, for instance, a while ago when no physical work was actually done. There's also the whole transfer pricing issue that's raised its head again. And there's no doubt that there will be some fallout as the companies that are sensitive to market perceptions and shareholder perceptions, like the banks, start taking evasive action. But it's still early days, Uche.
And Angelo, have we heard anything from South Africa's Revenue Service? Are they planning to do anything about these findings anytime soon?
Well, SARS, the Revenue Services, have said nothing yet. They have their hands full at the moment, I guess, thinking about suing a South African investigative journalist and author, Jacques Poe, for releasing a confidential taxpayer information in his recently released book called The President's Keepers. At some point, though, SARS will most likely have a look and a closer look at the revelations contained in this data dump. On the other hand, though, the fact that Glencore, some banks, and several other businesses and individuals, high-profile ones like Cyril Ramaphosa's Shanduka are mentioned, doesn't mean that they've done anything illegal, as Richard was saying. It's just questionable. As an aside, though, you'll recall that the local revenue collection service here is around $3.5 billion short of its targets that it needs to meet by next year. So it might become a way of reducing that gap a bit. These revelations, of course, could be construed to be low-hanging fruit by some SARS officials. Uche?
Well, many thanks to both of you for those insights. Of course, Richard Bestick in London and Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg.